Is it possible to be gentle, even if we don't feel like it? Hey, welcome. We have another look into the life and message of Elizabeth Elliot, who called us to live to a higher standard and not be satisfied with just a little religion in life as a shallow substitute for giving God our best. Our series continues as we hear from family, friends, and others influenced by the life and message of Elizabeth Elliot. Hey, thank you for coming along with us today. Well, we continue our short series on trusting God for your husband's spirituality. Valerie Elliott Shepard, daughter of Jim and Elizabeth, will be joining us again today as she thinks about a gentle and quiet spirit and about loving your husband. Also joining us later on, a friend of Elizabeth who will talk about a first, yet somewhat difficult meeting with a multifaceted Elizabeth Elliot. And another friend of Elizabeth, Juana Mikels, talks about a prayer that she learned from Elizabeth that's been helpful to her. That coming up later. First, though, it's part 3 of Trusting God for Your Husband's Spirituality. We'll be dealing with one of the most common questions that came to Elizabeth. We'll be thinking about 1 Peter 3, about heart attitudes, about a daily sacrifice, about a love that is more than a feeling, about humility, service, looking to the Lord for answers, denying lies, and reminding ourselves that God is sufficient, and thinking about the danger of expectations that are, too high. Here's part 3 of Trusting God for Your Husband's Spirituality, a gentle and quiet spirit.
You are loved with an everlasting love. That's what the Bible says. And underneath are the everlasting arms. This is your friend, Elizabeth Elliot, talking today with my daughter, Valerie Shepard. She has an interesting topic this week, trusting God for our husband's spirituality. And I'm so glad, Val, that you chose this topic because I do get very many letters from women who are very earnest about wanting to do the will of God, but they're doubtful about whether it's right to follow the leading of a husband who perhaps is not a Christian at all, or who may be a very earnest Christian and yet might be making what the wife considers a disastrous mistake.
Well, in this passage, 1 Peter 3, God is commanding the wives to work on their inner attitude, work on their heart attitude. And we talked already a little bit about what it means to be chaste and respectful. And of course, it comes from humility. It comes from loving God with a pure heart and knowing that God gave us the husband that He gave us. I'll never forget realizing one day that the very things that irritated me in my husband were the very things I needed in order to purify and change my heart to be more like Jesus. When our husbands see the purity and reverence or the chasteness and respectfulness of our lives, they will want to love God more and love themselves less, which is what any Christian who is trying to live the life of Christ for another will encourage in other people. Other people will say, I want to be a more noble, more loving person because that person is showing me the love of Christ. I remember when I thought, these irritating things that drive me crazy about Walt are exactly what I need to change me, to make me humble. And the Bible says your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as braided hair and wearing of gold jewelry and fine clothes. Instead, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. So God's saying that's what our focus should be on. Lord, what is my heart attitude? How do I need to change? Instead of focusing on the outward beauty or focusing on how wrong we think our husbands are, we need to say, Lord, change me, before we say, Lord, change him. And I think there are 4 or 5 things that inner beauty consists in, and they are, 1, forgetting ourselves. If I spend time or sympathy on myself, I have less and less time for sympathy for others. 2, we need to seek to know God through daily duties. In other words, my loving service to my husband is the very way that I'm going to learn to know God. 3, we need to look to the Lord for answers rather than to our husbands all the time. For so many wives, they get married, especially Christian couples get married thinking their husbands or their wives are going to make everything easy and wonderful because they're Christians. They have high expectations that the marriage will be perfect because they're both totally submitted to the Lord, and they find out that marriage exposes how insubmissive and rebellious they are and selfish. So we need to look to the Lord for answers, and that's what gives us this reverent behavior. So that means waiting on the Lord. It means trusting, really believing that God will take care of a situation. And fourthly, it means to deny the lies of the world. And the world is telling us, have your own way, do what seems right to you. I just heard a couple of weeks ago, Oprah Winfrey had on someone saying that she, and not that I watch Oprah Winfrey all the time, I happened to turn it on one afternoon, but she had on 2 women, very popular, famous movie stars, who talked about how we need to follow our intuitions. Well, I know my intuitions are mostly selfish. and it was as if this was the most wonderful revelation to everybody, to Oprah and the whole audience, that our intuitions to follow whatever our feelings told us to follow was exactly what we needed to do. And that's what the world is telling us. Well, God is saying, listen to Him. And our hearts are deceptive. Our hearts are deceitful.
Yes, and it's only through our weaknesses and our recognition of our weaknesses that we begin to learn that it is there that the power of Christ rests upon us. Paul makes this astonishing statement, I glory in tribulations and weaknesses and all sorts of difficulties, in order that the power of Christ may rest upon me. And I'm so glad, Val, that you keep emphasizing that it's marriage, it is the having to live together with another human being that exposes our selfishness and our weakness. And if a sinful man and a sinful woman are going to live together 365 days a year, there will be many occasions for saying, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And many occasions, as you're saying so well, for us wives to exhibit a very different attitude from what the Oprah Winfrey crowd is propagating.
Many occasions for self-denial. Die to self. And of course, the lies of the world are, you live for yourself. You live to make yourself happy. And God is saying, live for me, honor me, please me. And that means we have to die to ourselves. And so marriage takes working at, as you said, 365 days a year, continually asking God to show us how to lay down our lives for someone else.
And what would you say of the women whose marriages you know something about? Are the women who are the most godly and gentle and quiet, are they not the happiest
Yes.
marriages?
Yes.
Surely.
Absolutely.
That would be my observation of yours and Walt's. It's just a wonderful thing to see a truly happy marriage. But where does it come from? Sacrifice. Love means sacrifice.
Right. And love is action, not just a feeling to be learned. Love is real, day-to-day, doing for others. So I've said 4 things what inner beauty consists in. Let me repeat them. Humility, which is forgetting yourself. If I spend time on sympathy for myself, I have none left for others. Secondly, seeking to know God through daily duties, loving service to others. Thirdly, inner beauty consists in looking to the Lord for answers rather than leaning in our own understanding or always looking to our husbands for answers for everything. And fourthly, denying the lies of the world and or Satan. And lastly, this looking to the Lord for answers culminates in simply saying that to myself, God is enough for me. God is sufficient for all of my needs. My husband will not meet all of my needs. And so often, as I mentioned, Christian couples have this high expectation of their spouses that everything will be wonderful because my husband or my spouse is a Christian. But you find out because of sin that they disappoint you. And you find out as you trust in God, as you look to Him, as you wait upon Him, that He will be enough. His grace is sufficient. His grace knows no limits. His love has no bounds. And I'm so thankful the Lord has slowly but surely been opening my eyes to learn to put love first rather than put myself, my own ideas or opinions first. I'm still failing. Yesterday morning, we were all getting ready to go to church. My husband had to leave earlier than the rest of us, and Sarah came running into the room. Sarah's my 3-year-old. And he said to her, "Sarah, do you see my new suit?" And I said in a disgusted way, "Well, she's not even paying any attention. She has no idea whether you have a new suit on or not." Well, that irritated comment from me made him irritated. And so I definitely don't have it together. Have not learned the gentle and quiet spirit for all occasions. But he looked at me and I looked at him, and he said, "I'm just trying to converse with her, say something to her." And so I walked away. Of course, we were both in a hurry, and later on, he and I both apologized to each other. I'm just saying that here's an occasion, it can happen any number of times, where I see my own selfish way, which is, at that point, it was simply, I need to be getting ready. Why are you stopping her to tell her that? She has no idea what you're saying or what you're talking about. And he was simply trying to talk with Sarah. And so believing and trusting the truth that God is enough for me often shows me, and it always exposes, that I think I'm enough for myself. Does that make sense? That I think...
Yes, self-sufficiency.
That I think I can make my opinion known, then that will set everything right. Well, it doesn't. The sin often causes someone else to sin.
Self-sufficiency is, of course, one of the devil's lies. You're right, he's wrong. So thank you, Val, for talking.
You're welcome.
About this very necessary subject, and one that is for all of us who are married, I think, a lifetime lesson. How grateful we can be that God has given us husbands. And as many of you know, I now have husband number 3. My first husband died. My second husband also died. And God has tested me in different ways with each of those 3. But I'm very thankful that we can go back to the Lord and realize that it is through His revelation to us of our weaknesses that He gives us His power and His love.
Part 3 of our 5-part series, Trusting God for Your Husband's Spirituality. That was called A Gentle and Quiet Spirit. Joining us today, the chairperson of the Lilias Trotter Legacy, Miriam Rockness. And our goal here at our time together is not to present Elizabeth as some kind of perfect person. We started out our current series, with You Marry a Sinner. And we all have our times when we're not at our best. But this was a multifaceted visit, a first meeting between Miriam and Elizabeth.
It's actually a really wonderful story with a really bad start. My husband's parents were missionaries, and the Howard family was very generous to missionaries. And his family were guests. I guess they had a cottage in Long Island. I'm not sure where. And his family was recipient of a week on several occasions, I believe. So when we invited Elizabeth Elliot to the church in Lake Wales, Florida, that my husband pastored, we invited her to be our women's retreat speaker, and then we extended the invitation kind of thinking we were taking advantage of her, to speak in Sunday school, and then she doesn't preach, but to give an address in church. So because of the family connection, we decided just to invite her to stay at our home. Well, she could not have arrived at a worse time for herself. She had been with Valerie, hoping to be there when one of her babies was born, and she had to leave before the baby was born. She then went to visit Abe, Hampton Du Bois, and it was her last visit with him. She knew he was dying. So she has now left her daughter without fulfilling her mission. She said goodbye to a beloved friend. She's been separated from Lars for several weeks, and she arrives at our home absolutely spent, tired, and a little bit cranky. And within the first hour, I had regretted having her at our home. I thought she would have been so much happier just in a motel on their own. And so I remember saying, that after dinner we were going up to Bach Tower Gardens, where there was a carillon concert, a moonlight concert. She was welcome to join us. They were welcome to stay home, that we'd have strawberry shortcake afterwards. But as I was just feeling, she started asking, she showed the brusque side of Elizabeth Elliot. When I said, she said, well, how far is this? I said, well, it's just up the hill. How far is up the hill? Well, I didn't know how, I mean, maybe 3 miles. But she just kept pressing, and then she and Lars left, and Dave and I looked at each other, and he said, well, we're leaving at such and such a time. If you're there, you can join us, but don't worry about it. So we were actually surprised when she arrived downstairs. And as it turned out, it's a place where they could be alone, and they could listen to a concert. And we met back, and as we were coming in, I just said, no, you don't have to stay for dessert. And by this time, she was relaxed enough to say, well, you mean I go upstairs and you get strawberry shortcake downstairs? So she was really coming around. And then after the retreat, she went, took a nap. It was wonderful. She did a wonderful job. And then she joined me in my morning room for tea or coffee. And we spent probably 2 hours just sharing books, her thinking about her ideas and prompts for writing. And she just was, it was just like I was with an old friend. It was just a time of great fellowship and joy. Well, after the meal, our children were young at the time. She showed her gift of mimicry. She sat down at the piano and played like her piano player had at their church. Told stories. I mean, we ended up just having an incredibly wonderful visit. And as we were walking to church, my little son at that time, like 8 years old, he said, that Mrs. Elliot, he said, she's just a hoot. And I thought, do I tell her that or not? And I did tell her, and she just loved that. We just saw, I think in that period of time, we had in microcosm the different facets of Elizabeth Elliot. From the person that could kind of put one off a bit, to a person who was vulnerable and sharing and open and then fun-loving, and then with her powerful speaking ministry. It was an amazing time.
Miriam Rockness, board chair of the Lilius Trotter Legacy Organization. Later on, we'll hear about a prayer that had an important part in the life of Juana Mikels, a friend of Elizabeth. Right now, it's part 4 of our 5-part look at trusting God for your husband's spirituality. Maybe you've heard of a reverent attitude. What exactly does that mean? Think about the pitfalls of trying to change a spouse, and about somebody who said that we're not all prize packages. Look for the essentials and skip the rest.
This is your friend, Elizabeth Elliot, talking again today with my daughter, Valerie Shepard from California. And we're just very grateful for the privilege, aren't we, Val?
Yes, I'm thankful.
And Valerie's talking about what?
Trusting the Lord for your husband's spirituality. I'll read from 1 Peter 3, verses 4 on. Instead, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to make themselves beautiful. They were submissive to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her master. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. Well, when we mentioned the word reverence, that we are to have a reverent attitude or reverent behavior, I think maybe we need to define that. Reverence simply means fearing God rather than fearing man or fearing yourself or fearing circumstances or the devil. Reverence means putting your trust and your hope completely in God. So when your husband sees you acting reverently, he doesn't see you acting holier than thou. He sees you acting as he would want his wife to act, and that is with a sweet and trusting spirit instead of a judgmental, critical, noisy spirit.
Exactly.
I know that because we women are talkers in general, we want to defend ourselves. We want to make our opinions known. Most of us are very opinionated, and over the years, I've been learning that to quietly listen to my husband is much more worthwhile to him than when I am making my opinions known and not listening to him. If I don't have a listening spirit towards him, then he's not really going to have a listening spirit towards me.
We women really talk way too much.
We talk too
don't
much.
You think?
And I feel sorry for so many husbands who have to listen to their wives' opinions about everything, whether it was going to Target and finding 3 different shirts for themselves or for their children, or whether it was what food to have that night, when most husbands don't really care. As long as you feed them and clothe them, they don't want to hear about all the details that we women are so interested in.
It's high time we get sorted out the fact that men are men.
Right.
And women are women.
Right.
And we can't expect men to act like women or to think like women, and we would certainly hope that our husbands would not expect us to act like men and think like men.
Right.
And, you know, the difference between men and women was God's design, and it is infinitely deeper and more mysterious than the merely physical distinction. Mm-hmm. I think if we assume that the difference between men and women is primarily a physical triviality, we're far from understanding what marriage is all about. God purposely put together 2 individuals made in the image of God, but with very different ways of coming at things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So going back to what reverence means, if we are respectful to our husbands because we truly fear God, then our husbands will want to listen to us more. And of course, always we should have this attitude of, Lord, teach me to be quiet and listen before I make my opinion known. And Lord, teach me to love and help and encourage rather than trying to change him. And I think many of us, when we first get married, we have this idea that we will get to change them because we think we can train and teach and change someone's habits, and we can't.
Well, you are preaching at me, Val. You are preaching at me. And I often say to people that you minister to me in the things that you have learned. Actually, you have been married to Walt longer than I've ever been married to any one of my 3 husbands. But certainly God has many things still to teach me.
And he has many things to teach me, too. I certainly don't want to sound like I've made it here.
May our listeners realize that they are listening to 2 sinful women who really want to be sanctified. Mm-hmm. And I think of what dear Dorothy Collins used to say. You remember our old friend who lived down there on Cape Cod, and she was a single woman all her life, died in her 90s. But she used to say frequently, Betty dear, she would say, Betty dear, we're not all prize packages. Look for the essentials and skip the rest.
I remember that too. So our main concern in loving our husbands, in being reverent, and in having this inner beauty that he exhorts us to have should be not, do I have inner beauty, And I know for many years I worried so much of whether I was really growing, whether I was really being changed, whether I was being sanctified, but rather the prayer should be in my heart, help me, Father, to love as you love, to forgive as you forgave me, and to help those around me, and as you have helped me. Because inner beauty consists of a heart that is totally committed to pleasing her Father in heaven. A mind that is set on doing God's will rather than her own will. A heart ready to love at any cost to her own happiness. I really believe God wants our hearts spiritually enlarged. We know medically that's a term we don't want to have. We don't want to have enlarged hearts medically, but spiritually, He is always trying to open and widen our understanding of His love and our understanding of how His love should be manifested in our lives towards other kinds of people. And over the years, as I put at the top of my little prayer list for Walt, Lord, increase my love for him, I didn't know how the Lord was going to answer that prayer for me, because I felt like I would always see his weaknesses. I would always see Walt's weaknesses. I would always be disappointed or not have the hope that God would really sanctify my husband as I wanted him to sanctify him. And as I kept on praying, Lord, increase my love for him, I think this has been over 10 years that I've had that little prayer card, I slowly began to see that God was helping me to be more and more thankful and appreciative so that I could honor my husband with a heart that was truly looking to God for answers, a heart that was truly waiting and trusting upon God. And this whole spirit of trusting the Lord for your husband's spirituality comes from believing God's word that he who has begun a good work in you will perform it. And so often we know that verse in our heads, but we don't practice it. And your dear friend Elizabeth Lasker, who I call Aunt Bunny, has so often said to me, we only really believe what we practice, or we only really practice what we really believe. And we know that verse, he who has begun a good work, but we don't practice it if we're trying to completely change our husbands through our lectures. And I know for many years I gave my husband lectures. If he would do this and this and this, then he would be a better father and a better preacher. And he would get so discouraged by those lectures that I gave him.
Admonitions.
And they were, I've always felt like I had the gift of exhortation, but I certainly didn't have the gift of love in those lectures that I was giving my poor husband. He had to sit through and put up with my critical spirit. And as I prayed, Lord, increase my love for him, I began to get less and less critical. And I'm so thankful that's the Lord's grace doing that. It's not me. It's just simply, Lord, it's my prayer that I would really be an encouragement to my husband rather than a discouragement. And that's what I was for so long, trying to make him what I thought he ought to be by setting these standards that I had set for him. Even though the standards themselves were good, I focused on those more than I focused on loving God. Does that make sense?
Yes. Dorothy Sayers said, no man wants to be admonished by a woman. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's in line with what God says. Right. It is not our prerogative to be continually correcting our husbands and discouraging them, as you say. That's exactly what happened with dear Walt. And I think of Walt as a very gentle man. He's a gentleman, and he is a gentle man. There may be other sides to him that I've never seen, but I've known Walt for a long time. And he's soft-spoken.
He is soft-spoken. And he's very sensitive to people's feelings and in his own feelings. He's sensitive. And, of course, that can be a great advantage when used with God's grace to be able to listen to people and be able to love them and be tender-hearted towards people. And I'm so thankful for that. The unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit is precious in God's sight. In other words, when we really try to trust in God rather than trust and lean on our own understanding, He is pleased with us. He is, as a father is happy to see his child start to walk, He is pleased that we are learning to trust and believe in His word rather than depending upon ourselves to change someone.
That reminds me of what George MacDonald said, I think it was George MacDonald, that the father is pleased when the child takes his first stumbling step, but he will not be satisfied until the boy can stride like a man. God is easy to please, but hard to satisfy, because He's still in the process with you and me, with our husbands, with everyone who wants to serve and love Him, in conforming us to the image of Christ. Thank you so much, Val, for being with me again today.
Thank you.
Part 4 of Trusting God for Your Husband's Spirituality. Loving Your Husband was the name of that one. One more in this series next time, and we'll begin a new series as well on transformation in Christ. That's next time. But first, before we go, think about a prayer. A friend of Elizabeth, Juana Mikels, says this was an important prayer that she learned from her friend Elizabeth.
I have prayed over and over the last 5 years and written on this card a prayer that Elizabeth Elliot taught me. I am willing to receive what you send, to lack what you withhold, to relinquish what you take, to suffer what you inflict, to do what you command, to be what you require. And let my obedience be without interruption. In Philippians 4:8, it says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. I am willing to receive what you send, to lack what you withhold, to relinquish what you take, to suffer what you inflict, to do what you command, to be what you require. And let my obedience be without interruption.
A friend of Elizabeth, Juana Mikels. Well, as our time comes to an end, let me thank you for letting us come into your home. Maybe along with you as you took that drive across town, wherever we found you. And on behalf of the Elizabeth Elliot Foundation, in cooperation with the Bible Broadcasting Network, let me invite you to check out all the resources at elizabethelliot.org. More talks, videos, devotionals, and more. elizabethelliot.org. And if you get a chance, leave a review for us wherever you found our program today. Thanks. And until next time, may God remind you each and every day, you are loved with an everlasting love, and underneath are the everlasting arms.